Welcome to the Magnify Your Miracles podcast. Get ready to be inspired, uplifted, and connected to the miraculous energy of unconditional love that I call Mother Mary. If you're a highly sensitive, highly creative entrepreneur or light worker, and you want to magnify your impact and your intuition, you are in the right place. I'm your host, Reverend Frances Faden, interfaith minister, intuitive coach, and author of Meditation is Friendship with God. I can't wait to share miraculous stories, books, meditations, messages, and interviews with other miraculous light workers just like you. Are you ready to magnify your miracles? What are we waiting for? Let's get started. Hello, my miraculous friend, and welcome to another episode of the Magnify Your Miracles podcast. This is Reverend Frances Faden, and I'm so excited and so grateful that we get to spend this time together today because we are talking to the author of this awesome book, Inspired by Angels. I just did a review of this last week. Sinda Jordan is joining us, and we're going to be talking about all kinds of amazing things with angels, and I don't even want to start talking about what we're going to be talking about. First, please join me in taking a few deep breaths. Let's get ourselves grounded and centered and really open and receptive to whatever inspiration we're supposed to be receiving today. If you're driving, please keep your eyes open, but you can still bring your awareness to your breath. Breathing in the energy of expansion, breathing out anything you no longer need. And as you start to feel yourself settling in, your mind starts to calm down. There's a receptivity within you that begins to grow. And whatever it is that you need to feel inspired, to feel uplifted, to feel connected, just know that that's exactly what you're going to be hearing today. And as we really accept and know that truth, let's take one more deep breath together in gratitude, and we can begin. All right, well, welcome once again, my friend, and I'm just so thrilled to be able to spend this time with you and to share my connection, my recent connection with the author of Inspired by Angels, Sinda Jordan. Let me tell you a little bit about her, and then we will bring her onto the podcast. Sinda Jordan is the published author of the award-winning book, Inspired by Angels, and she's a non-denominational minister through People House in Denver, Colorado, doing private self-discovery facilitation, and we're going to be learning about that today. In 1993, she had a spiritual experience that she wrote about in a journal, and in 1995, that journal became the published book, Inspired by Angels. This was a life-changing experience for her. After the book was published, people began seeking her out for readings, and she found herself doing a type of spiritual audit with people with the help and support of the Archangels. Her background previous to this had been in accounting and auditing, so the transition into spiritual auditing became a natural next step. Sinda began helping others utilize self-empathy to transform disowned shadow aspects into supportive wisdom aspects. When the shadow is approached with empathy and respect, it informs and transforms. Sinda is the founder of the Center for Self-Discovery and is the creative developer of the pattern work. She specializes in facilitating deep self-inquiry through the pattern work process. The pattern work allows you to consciously work with the unconscious holding patterns that obscure your true nature. Transformation of these patterns provides expanded awareness, greater understanding, increased capacity for receiving, and embodiment of the soul. It is a systematic way for people to gently open and blossom, utilizing their sensitivity and empathic ability at a skill level. Through this work, clients are able to embrace the healing abilities of self-empathy and transform their patterns and their lives. Sinda lives in Denver, Colorado, and works with clients over the phone and through Zoom. And we'll find out more about how you can connect with her throughout our conversation today. So please help me welcome Sinda Jordan. Hi, Sinda.
Hi, Frances. Thank you for having me here today.
I'm so excited to have you here. I shared in the podcast last week the miraculous story of how your book came to me, and then how I ended up moving to the town where your publisher was. And then at Christmas time, I was looking for gifts for my clients, and your book popped in my head. And it's from a long time ago, and yet there it was. And everybody that I share this book with is just so thrilled with it. So I'm just so grateful to have you here on the Magnify Your Miracles podcast. Welcome.
I am so thankful to be here, and so thankful for the way you're spreading the word about the rebirth of my book. The book is it's having a comeback.
Yeah, and it's really such a good time for it to come. So before we jump into talking about how you wrote the book and your connection with the Archangels, I always like to ask all of my guests what your definition of a miracle is.
A miracle to me is a space for grace. It's so therefore it could be anything, but it's anything that kind of generates or creates or opens that space for grace. And when I say grace, I'm also thinking in terms of it's like something that opens up a space in time for a little more heaven to come and touch our earth, whether it's an environment or a location or our own bodies. But it's a way that we open up a space, like miracles open up space for me.
Yeah.
And that creates this opening, and then that opening allows the grace in. The grace comes through time, and it touches form, and then things change and alter.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. A space for grace. What a beautiful definition. Thank you so much. So as we were talking about your background, you have a very different background than what you're doing in some ways. And I love this book. I was wondering if you could share with us a little bit more about how did the book come about and your connection with the angels. You're one of the first people that I'd ever come across who specifically spoke about these 4 archangels. And I work with them all the time when I work with Mother Mary. That's why I love this book so much. But how did that happen for you?
Well, this all got started in about 1993. So it was a long time ago. And I was having some autoimmune challenges with my body, and some challenges in my home life. And I had started to meditate for the first time. Mm-hmm. So meditating started to be one of those first kind of miracle spaces that opened up a space for kind of different frequencies of energies to come in and to be more aware of what was going on internally. Mm-hmm. And that went on for several months. And then somebody handed me a magazine article. And in it, there was an interview with Dr. Joan Borisenko. And she was talking about how she invoked the 4 archangels of Michael, Raphael, and Uriel, and Gabriel. And she did it in a way that was kind of like a protective thing, like in 4 directions, kind of. And so I just thought that was intriguing. She was this very respected doctor, and here she was talking about angels. I had no, real idea about what that was or what that meant. I'm not a religious person. And so I started doing, I guess, my first alchemy. I'm really kind of an alchemist. And I started doing my first alchemy, which was to invoke the archangels as part of my meditation. So in doing that, stuff started happening. So again, another space for grace and things coming through time, touching form. And I'm sensitive, and I could feel things happening as a recognition that something was going on, something was happening, something was different. And so I felt this incredible, the only thing I could call was unconditional love. And I started to cry. I started feeling like something that was hard inside of me was softening. Mm-hmm. And so more opening was occurring. And as a result of doing that, and then I made that, I only had about 15, 20 minutes every morning. And so I just started kind of making an appointment with myself to do this. And things started changing. My autoimmune problems were improving. Things were getting better. And some of the situations and the relationship dynamics in my family were improving. And so I was like, something's happening here. I didn't really have an exact name for it, but I was aware that things were changing. So then there's a leap that sort of occurs. And that is when I wasn't meditating, I wasn't invoking, and discovered that I had some clairaudience in the way that I heard a voice that felt like it was outside of me, but in my head.
Right.
And it said, if you write, Michael will come. Now, I don't know if any of you are aware of the movie Field of Dreams, but I felt like Kevin Costner in the Field of Dreams going, Michael, who, right? What are we talking about here? And,
right.
But there was again, another opening and a sense of curiosity. So I dropped what I was doing and I sat down and I got a pencil and a piece of paper and I was squeezing the life out of that pencil. I was holding it so tightly, and I was holding it onto the paper and I was waiting for the pencil to move by itself. And because I didn't know what I was doing. And it did. And there's very scribbly, hello, this is Michael, happened. And I dropped the pencil and this huge fear came up.
Yeah.
And I became very frightened. And I said, okay, I did it. I'm done. That's over. I don't know what this is. I don't know what's happening. But there was a sense of the support of to stay with that fear. Stay with the fear, stay with it, stay with it, stay with it until the fear dissolved. Mm-hmm. And as that fear dissolved, I felt an opening in my heart. And as I felt an opening in my heart, I heard the words again. And it said, write what you feel and hear and sense. You do not have to squeeze the life out of the pencil. Mm-hmm. And, try it again. And whenever fear shows up, stop, stay with the fear, and dissolve it. Mm. So that's what I did. And so the next thing I wrote was the very first chapter, the very first heading. So the Inspired by Angels journal was in the sequence of which I received them. So the first one's very short because I was just kind of learning how to do this. And as fear would come in, I would stop. It was very important to stop when the fear came in. Mm-hmm. And let whatever I was writing and what was going on help dissolve the fear. So it kind of became this process, this cycle. And then the more the fear would dissolve, the more things would open, more space for grace, more things would open. And then I could write more and for longer periods of time. As long as I honored my fear when it showed up, stopped. And so that's what I did. And I made an appointment. Again, like I'd been doing with the meditation, I would do meditation first, and then I made an appointment each morning that I could to sit down in the sunlight and do this and stop when the fear showed up.
Wow.
Now this went on for months.
Yeah.
And I noticed the next thing that was happening that was a little bit different is friends that lived in the mountain community where I was at the time and in the neighborhood were starting to come and seek me out for help and advice and talk to me more intimately about personal problems that were going on in their life. This was not normally how we communicated with each other. And one day when one of these female friends came and we were having a cup of tea and she's now, it was kind of like confession. People were coming and confessing to me what was going on. It's like, do I really want to know this? But I reached for the writing that I had done that morning because it was just completely appropriate and in alignment to what she was talking about and what was going on. And I took out the journal and I read what I'd written. and said, does this help you at all? And then she started to cry.
Oh.
And she said, where did you get that? And I said, I wrote it, and I hadn't told anybody what was happening. It was my little secret. This was like, I'm not talking about this.
Yeah.
And so she said, you can't keep these to yourself. And I said, I can if I want to. I don't think I want the consequences of not doing that.
Right, right.
And so she said, no, I'm serious. You cannot keep these to yourself. These need to be shared.
Yeah.
I don't think these are meant just for you, or you wouldn't have had the impulse to share it with me.
Yeah. Wow.
And then that created a fear that lasted for weeks. I didn't write for a while because I had to work through that level of fear that came up as to what was about to happen, what was going on. And she said, I think this needs to become a book.
Mm.
And so that was the beginning of how that sort of process started. And then I accepted that idea. I had to move from what I call from fear into acceptance. And so I didn't tell anybody else for a while. Like, my family didn't know this was going on.
Right.
What does mom do when we're not there?
Right.
Know? It's like, and so I just kept writing. But then I found somebody, as I was writing this up, I went, okay, this has to be, then if it's going to be a book, it has to be typed up. So I tried to sit down on our, very early PC, computers,
right.
and tried to type. And I went, this is not the best use of my time. So I found out one of my other friends did transcribing as her assistant. I didn't know this. She just started talking to me about that, another opening. And so I took these and my dad had given me it's called a dictaphone way back. I mean, we're talking so early, we don't have any of the technology we have now, right?
Right.
So it slows things down. And I took what I had written and I did I did an audible thing, and I just recorded it on a cassette for her and then gave it to her to listen to type up.
Wow.
Now, when somebody transcribes, they don't pay attention to the content. They're just typing it up. It's just what they do. So she would type it up. Then she had it on her computer and then she would give me hard copies, and I could make corrections on it. So, but then she got a hold of me after doing this for about a month, and she said, "What am I typing?" And I said, "Well." Then here we go again. I have to tell her what's happening. And I said, why do you ask? She said, because something is changing in me by typing this. She goes, I'm having these feelings in my body. And then I had this dream that I'm supposed to go to the doctor because I have a problem with my heart.
Mm.
And she said that dream was so real. And I said, well, I think you should follow up on that. And she did. And they found the very early detections of a heart problem.
Mm-hmm.
And she was able to get on medication. But they said if she had not, that she probably would have died.
Wow.
And she had young kids. And she was these kinds of things were happening as part of, which was actually an encouragement to put this out there so that it could touch people's lives in however way, in whatever manner, and let me know. I mean, and part of the fear that I had to work through that would come up even after that event, that we both were like, okay, we just want to stop this for a little bit, and, readjust and move through more fear again that would come up, that there wasn't going to be a lot of control as to the way that this was going to impact people. It was going to impact people. I was going to impact people. And I wasn't really, as I was going to kind of give birth to this and release it. That's what it felt like a mom giving birth to something. But just like with a child, I'm not going to have a lot of control as to what this is going to be, what it's become, how it goes out in the world, how it's going to touch people. It's my job to let it come through me. It's not my job to control it.
Yeah.
So that was
Wow.
that was kind of how the steps went through. This went on for about for a year. By 1995, I was visiting friends. I think it was like 1994. I was visiting friends in Wisconsin, and they had a really small library, and she said they kind of knew what was going on. And she said, I know the people at the library. I can check out the book, The Writer's Market, and we can look and see what's there. And I went through kind of looking at different publishers, and I landed on Blue Dolphin Publishing, and I just knew it, like it lit up on the page. Now, by then, health things have been improving. I'm opening my mouth and I'm telling more people. And so now I'm getting more help in that way. So I just called them. I called them up and said, here's what I got. And they're the ones that were publishing at the time, Mother Mary's Message to the World.
Oh, that's right.
And so it was like, it felt like it was like the Angels and Mother Mary, like that was kind of a fit. It felt like that kind of fit together. And there was something about the dolphin image too that just, so I got this lovely lady named Wendy, and she goes, absolutely, we want this.
Wow.
Here's what you do. Here's the format. Here's how it has to be submitted. Here's who I want you to send it to my attention, because we get all this stuff so that I'll know and reference our phone conversation. Well, she gave it to Paul Clemens, who at the time was the owner of Blue Dolphin Publishing.
Mm-hmm.
And Paul's father was dying.
Oh.
And he gave the manuscript to his father to read. And his father said, I want this book published as one of my dying wishes.
Oh, wow. Boy, I just got goosebumps.
Oh
my
So
goodness.
This man I never met was responsible for having the book published and Paul's desire to honor his father. Because I think normally, in part of even back then with the publishing companies, I can't say this for certain, but I think the authors were, paying money and contributing to the process and doing this. His father put up all the money and backed the entire process.
Wow.
And then Paul, I think, also said, no, as Mike gets you, I'm going to do this for you. And that wasn't their normal thing. And they didn't do hardcover books very often. The whole team, Paul was busy with his father. The whole team got together. They created this beautiful book that came out in hardcover first. It was printed in purple ink. It was won an award for its design. Like the whole team came together to make this happen. So that I had this beautiful book. It was lovely.
That is like a miraculous story. I mean, it's really a miraculous story. And one of the things that I love that I hope listeners are really hearing is that it wasn't like the angel showed up and you were like, okay, let's go. Like there was fear that came up. And I think in the podcast, we're all highly sensitive, all of us who listen to this podcast. And I think that can be a challenge for people. A lot of people have the mistaken belief of, oh, well, if it's my purpose, I won't be afraid. I'll just kind of keep going because I'll be, in alignment. And I don't find that that's true. I find that there's that process of really facing the fear. And what I love for you is as you faced it, the angels kept opening more doors for you. And you got to see that this really wasn't your book. This was a book that belonged to the angels and belonged to the world.
Yeah, it belonged. It was coming through me. It was for me. It was helping me, but it was also for whoever it was to find. There was a larger you at stake out here this was to find their way too. And there was also this trust that would happen. Already in my little tiny, we're talking a very small mountain foothill suburb of Denver, a few houses. There were already 3 or 4 people that were being touched by this as I was willing to kind of open my mouth and say what was going on. Now, one of the things that I did hit a fear that I wasn't able to conquer in a timely manner that possibly held things back a little bit. But there was, at the time, Angel magazine was coming out right about
Right. I remember this time period.
happening.
Yeah.
They did we didn't even have the cover design yet. And the further back thing, the whole back page had a big thing about this book coming out, and interviews were happening. This was not my world. This was not the things that I had stepped up to. So when the book launched, it was at the, they have this, like every year, I don't know, maybe in different locations, but that year it was in Chicago. And there was like 50,000 people at this giant book convention that they had. And so that's where the book got launched. That's where it came out. And I got to go with Blue Dolphin and be there with my publicist, Kathy at the time, and man the booth. It was like, okay, I'll be there to help launch the book. And then I remember what it was like to have be listed in the catalog of, I'm going to have a book signing. So because the symbol for Angel for me and in the book was a feather, I went and got one of those Hallmark big white feather pins.
Pens, yeah, I remember.
Signing in at weddings. And I got this big feather pin, and I'm sitting there with my feather pin, and I'm watching as hundreds of people are lined up in front of me for me to talk to me and sign these books. This was such a surreal experience for me at the time. And then what happens is the librarian from my kids' school was there. Now, this had crossed over to that realm yet. And I knew, but the summer was over when I got back, that this was what was going to be happening. So, it was like, all right, I need to kind of face those fears of, it was one thing to have all these stories. It was another thing to be eyeing the librarian for the school. She says, I had no idea. And I said, I had no idea you were going to be here. So it began of how that was going to happen, even more so. The biggest one was at that convention. I ran into, I had a book bag. I had books in the bag, and I was going around, and I would just notice who I wanted to give books away to. That was sort of my job if I was out traveling around in the convention center. And I went into the bathroom, and there was this just regal woman standing there. And I said, I'd like to give you a copy of my book. And she said, I would love that. Thank you. Well, it turns out that she had a friend who was starting like the new Dateline show on TV or one of those programs. And they were going to do something on spirituality. And she gave them the book, and they called me.
Wow.
And I froze.
You froze. Yeah.
And I froze. And they said, we want you to fly to LA. We want you to be on our very first show. So I couldn't even watch a show to see how they did it. And I couldn't conquer the fear fast enough to be able to say yes and do it.
Wow.
So I always regret that, because maybe that book could have gotten out there in more ways. So I say that too for people, because it doesn't always mean that every fear that comes up that you're going to be able to move through. But over, as far as readiness, I ended up doing some cable TV shows later. I ended up in workshops in front of 50,000, not 50,000, like 50 to 100 people. I did a book signing in California at the Bodhi Tree. I did different things that I never thought I would have been able to do. So I had to look at the fears that I successfully conquered and allow the ones that I didn't to still find their way to move through, so that I can be on a podcast with you. Or
that's just what I was thinking. It's like it's not too late. That's what I keep hearing. It's like I hear Michael in my head saying, "It's not too late."
Not too late. It's not like some of the ways these things cycle back through, that we have different times and things for that. So, some fears take more time and more maturity to move through than others, but they keep creating these openings on the path. It's like conquer fear, open, conquer fear, open.
Yeah. I love that. So speaking of conquering fears, let's talk about how, like, you didn't have this connection with the angels, and then you did have this connection with the angels, and so the autoimmune thing started getting better, and then you took a turn, kind of, so to speak. Like, we all think about the angels and these beings of light, but it actually took you into what you call shadow work. Tell us a little bit about how the angels kind of guided you and helped you with the work that you're doing now today.
Well, a couple of things. One is, like, I found people starting to come to me and ask me to help them with things. And I would notice that these workshops and things that I was doing, what was coming up was people's darker fears, their, they found themselves confessing things they hadn't told other people. I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this at some level? After kind of years of facilitating people, I would realize that, I guess the Catholic tradition about confession, there's something about it that has a way of creating cleansing and opening, but it doesn't have to be limited to religion.
Mm-hmm.
There's a way in which we want to connect, and we want to kind of purify and cleanse ourselves. But we also, I realized it wasn't so much to get rid of, it was to include, to transcend. So that I was looking at my own experience, and really it was about being able to empathize with my fears. It was about being able to include them. It was about being able to see that there was wisdom in them, about not who I was, but letting me know where I was in time and space, and what needed to mature, and what things still needed to be, where there needed to be some growth and development. And so that this idea, I think spirituality, it sometimes is like, well, you can't have love and fear be in the same place. I go, no, it's the perfect place for those two things to be, is right together.
Wow.
Love needs to come and touch fear. It's not that fear can chase away love, or love chase. It's like an alchemy that happens, and they need to be in the same place.
I love that. So it's so interesting, because it's the opposite. And it's been my experience so many times on the spiritual path that what I think is going to be the next step, or what I think is what's required, is the opposite type of a thing. So here you have these great beings of light, and you're having all these people with what they would identify as not light, coming, and then how to
need their darkness.
Exactly.
Well, then I thought about it. Like, what did the angels, what were they helping me through? My darkness.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay. And how were we doing that? We were utilizing empathy. What I found out was that, empathy it's a field. It's a field of energy, and angels are masters at it. They're masters of empathy, and they are part of that field. And that we can access that anytime, anywhere, whenever we need it. Empathy needed now.
I love
and there's
that.
this support that's there to help us deal, and this is probably leaning into more of a little bit where you're talking about, an audience of sensitive people in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to work through my own sensitivities. And what I found out was I had a gift of empathy. That gift of empathy was being played out through sympathy. And at the very last lesson and chapter in the book is being able to discern the difference between sympathy and empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And so where the book ends, practice begins. And it was like learning how to embody that material and learning how to put it into practice. And so taking empathy, not using it's like to include sympathy, but not having it be limited to the lower frequency of sympathy. And then being able to learn how to empathize with myself and my own fears with support of a whole field of empathy. I found the fears would dissolve.
I'm wondering if, just for the sake of the listeners, if you could give your definition of the difference between sympathy and empathy. I have mine, but I want to hear what you have to say.
When I'm sympathizing with someone, there's a little more of an intellectual component to that. I'm sort of intellectualizing with them at some level, maybe even fantasizing a little bit. I'm definitely, there's some mergy energy in that too. And that doesn't make it wrong. It doesn't mean that there aren't times when that's appropriate. But when I do that, I lose myself.
Right.
And I start taking on and allowing somebody else's energies to live through my body. Mm-hmm. I start taking on their environment. I start taking on their emotions and feelings. To me, sympathy ends up in sacrifice. And
that's powerful.
And so there's this sense of, realizing where I was sacrificing myself through sympathy. And empathy doesn't require me to sacrifice myself. It allows me to know what's mine. There's an actual real humility in that. And what's somebody else's. And it allows me to actually live my life instead of letting others and environments be living through me, which can create autoimmune problems. I found out better because the body is confused because it doesn't know what's it and what is somebody else.
I have to ask you to say that again, because I know so many of us that are highly sensitive have various versions of autoimmune things. So an autoimmune issue can also have the problem of you're highly sensitive and you're sympathizing with people. Right. And then the body gets confused.
Yes. So if I state from the great master of Jesus saying, be in the world, but not of it. So when we're sympathizing, we become of the world, of somebody's world. We merge with the world. We merge with somebody else's world. And we start having that world live in us and through us instead of our own soul.
Yeah.
And so it's, and the problem is because empathy is a skill. Many of us have the gift of empathy that gets played out through sympathy, but none of us have really been taught to use it at skill level.
Wow.
And if you were young and showing aptitude towards math, or you were showing aptitude towards music, or you were showing aptitude with a gift for something, you would be put with other magicians and mathematicians and musicians to learn how to take that gift and turn it into a skill.
Right.
Empaths learn by being with people who, in an environment of people who disown their emotions and disown their feelings, disown their thoughts. They disown. And therefore, we are constantly reacting to an environment of disowned material and giving it a home, like we're an orphanage.
Wow. I've never heard it that way, but it makes total sense.
And so this is what I was learning and kind of being shown. And it's like working with the shadow aspect of empathy. Okay. And nobody is taught how to empathize with themselves.
So true.
As if that's even like that it requires another person in order to do this. And then we're constantly recreating the same environment that we were reacting to begin with. And we end up in this cycle and in this loop. We actually are unconsciously seeking that environment out so that we can keep doing, what we're doing.
So is that where the idea of it being a pattern, when you call it the pattern work, it is like identifying those subconscious patterns and bringing them to light?
Yes. And the other thing is, how do you teach somebody to empathize with themselves and to bring a gift and turn it into a skill? And then take it a step further and take that skill and generate it into a level of mastery. Okay.
Yeah.
So the angels are masters at empathy. Therefore, they weren't going, oh yeah, we want to live vicariously through you, through your body. No. In fact, I was trying to merge with them and they wouldn't let me.
Yeah, I believe it.
Other people were asking, so why didn't you just keep writing? He was like, nope, it was time to stop, time to put this into action, time to do something else. It was like, okay. Wow. If you have a gift, why don't you just keep doing the gift? Because the gift needs to become a skill.
So that's how, when you work with people, you work with highly sensitive people, you work with empaths. This is the most empowering thing I've ever heard for highly sensitive people, because so much of what's out there is like, you got to learn to protect yourself. You got to like all this stuff. But I've never heard anybody say, no, this is a skill that you have. It's a field of energy. The angels are there. They're masters of this energy. And you can actually learn how to become a master with this beautiful skill. Like, I'm floored right now, Sinda. I'm just like, wow, what an amazing thing. Rather than feeling, so many of my clients, they feel like a victim to their sensitivity.
Right. And so to actually start using that to empathize with them, an aspect of themselves in some way, whether it's putting a form out that represents an environment that's, something going on that's part of their inner environment. But, I can start by an outer environment. Mostly I do it with just a word.
Yeah.
Because a word is a pattern. And to see what's all going on underneath that word and find out what's happening there, and to be able to bring, so that, the process is slow. It's like you get down there, you contemplate, you be with it, you feel the fear, you be with it, you start bringing your light to it, you start letting that dissolve, and then you open up to something else. It's very different from what's out there. And as you're doing that, you're using that field of empathy. You are starting to use that empathy at skill level. You're actually creating some differentiation between you and the environment. You know what's similar, but you know what's different. If you're taking something on, you do it consciously, and you also take it off, just like you're putting on an article of clothing. I need to learn more about that. I'm going to take that on for a minute. Okay, got what I need to do. Make sure I also take it off.
Yeah.
Okay. You start to learn the skills. Now, I do want to also, besides the angels being teachers, I was guided to teachers to help me with this also. And one of the first, though I never met this woman, has probably been one of the most powerful, Carla McLaren. She's like, she wrote the Bible on empathy.
Carla McLaren?
Her book, Emotional Genius.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know if it's even in print, but I think she has a revised book on like emotional intelligence or something like that. Some of the things that she laid out were the beginnings also of somebody that was utilized. It's like my first connection of being with around information coming from a person that was using empathy at skill and the master level. Before that, it's just been like this field with the angels doing that, trying to help me to be able to do that. But there's something about recognizing another person, another human being that's, like you said, that's empowering, that's speaking to you in a language you go, how come I never heard this before?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like I'm a math student that's now been put with a master mathematician. And it's like, okay. So I was also guided through certain books, certain teachers, certain ways of finding out that, I'm not alone in this. There's others out there that have discovered this. And so, but my own process and how I worked with people, that developed organically.
Mm-hmm.
You got to realize this book came out in 1995.
Yes, it's been a while.
I've been at this for about 25 years.
Right.
So it kept organically growing and developing, and as a result, refining.
Yeah.
And I found out the simpler, like the biggest and the hardest part about working with people and with fears and shadows is their resistance. Sensitive people don't have resistance. They have more resistance than anybody.
Yes, I can attest to that.
In fact, because they're using resistance to try to protect themselves. It's
right.
like I'm asking them to remove all of their protections. It's like, that's not, it has to be honored. So what I discovered was the mind will not defend against one word. Now, this is a simple premise, but it took a long time to figure that out. Mm-hmm. It's like, and over and over and over again, because it doesn't consider it powerful enough to launch a defense.
As opposed to like an affirmation or some other phrase.
It'll defend against a sentence. It'll defend against an idea, a belief, but it won't defend against one word. Mm. So as a result of that, you could get, you can work with somebody and get in and get deeper and get to stuff that they haven't been able to get to, because I'm only using usually one word to begin with. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of came up with patterns of words and how these words kind of work together, how like a lock and key thing, how one sort of unlocks the other. Again, open space. More grace comes in, and then that one tended to want to go towards this one and do that one next. And then later, so I used to start out just working with people going towards, uncertainty or insecurity or anxiety or grief is usually one of the biggest ones. And then later I discovered that if I went in under the words that held more light, we would get to more shadow. Mm. Because a lot of people use their light as a way to hide shadow. Yeah. And so in the last few years, so I've watched my own system and process mutate. It's like, it's not a virus, but it tends to keep going through its own alchemy and mutating several times. And so the latest is a beautiful matrix of words that work with acceptance and love and compassion and faith and hope and the words that were used in the book. And I went back and pulled some of those words out and kind of created a matrix of words as a way to go in and explore and use your empathy to work with those words. Mm-hmm. And find out where you're using that to hide, as a place to hide stuff that needs to be accepted, included, transcended, healed. Basically, it's to become more whole. Yeah. Which is amazing. I just want to let the listeners know that I have had a chance to experience Sinda's work, and it is amazing. The people that that listen know that I only bring people on the podcast that I really believe in and that I trust can really help you to magnify your miracles. And if you're really ready to do this level of work,
It's quite miraculous. It's definitely quite miraculous. Sinda, tell us, if people want to find out, like, is this the right work for them, or if they want to get started, what do you recommend? Where can they find you?
Well, I have a website. It's just, sindajordan.com, and there's information on the website. They can, through that website, they can connect to me. They can send an email. I'll connect back with them. They can also, there's a link to being able to get the book on Amazon through the website also.
Yep, we'll put that link in the show notes.
It's in the paperback version, and there's an ebook version now. That's
awesome.
Yeah. And so what I offer is maybe like a 15, 20-minute free consultation. Probably we would do that maybe as a Zoom, so we could get to connect and see each other and meet each other, and just kind of get a sense of, where they're at, if this is the right next step. I really try to honor the people that contact me, to know that it just takes courage to do that, period. And so if we assess this isn't the right next step, sometimes I can give them a sense of maybe what that might be instead. I've had people contact me where they had a little too much active trauma still going on to go in and start working at this depth. And so being aware of that, to be able to help guide them to maybe because really good trauma work out there, somatic experiencing and EMDR and other things that way, to just kind of help them get a sense. It's like, go do that work and then get back in touch with me. And then we can do, because this is kind of an excavating. It's an archaeological.
It definitely is.
It's like, I should
definitely is.
I into my little brush, and we're going to see what this is. We're going to brush that off.
Yeah, it's good. And I really appreciate that you let people know, like, it's not for everybody, and you might not yet be, ready to do that level of excavation. But for those who are, I think it's remarkable. I really think it's remarkable and quite life-changing. So the website is Sinda Jordan. That's SindaJordan, SindaJordan.com. You can go there for the book, and you can also go there to contact Sinda and find out about having one of these complimentary consultations to just see, is this kind of work something that would be helpful for you? If you are an empath, if you're a highly sensitive person, I would check it out. I would check it out and just see if this might be a next right step for you.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to connect and to get to say some of these words out loud that I don't, I haven't said in a long time. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And it's very, very comfortable and safe. And also, what's the word I want to find here? Inspiring, in the sense of, you inspired me to say things that I know normally put out there in that way. And I think it's what needs to be said. And I think even if somebody doesn't do this work, I think even just hearing that can help them know that there's nothing wrong with them. It's not who they are, it's where they are. And that whatever allows them to stop merging with their environment and other people, and start really allowing themselves to embody who they are and embody their soul and start living from who they really are. That's the best I can, if I can inspire that in one other person, I'm good.
So beautiful. Well, you definitely do. And thank you for saying yes to the angels. Thank you for saying yes to the book. Thank you for saying yes to the shadow and being willing to do that work with people and bring the light and the shadow together. Thank you for everything that you do and for being here with us today. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Frances.
All right, my friend. Well, thank you for listening again to this beautiful podcast. Everything will be in the show notes for you, but I really encourage you to reach out to SindaJordan.com and see if that might be a fit for you. And as always, please remember that the key to magnifying your miracles is to remember that your miracle is already here. Thank you, my friends. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Magnify Your Miracles podcast. I'm so grateful to be able to spend this time with you. If you want even more inspiration, feel free to visit my website, francisfaden.com or magnifyyourmiracles.com. And if you did enjoy this episode, I would really appreciate it if you left a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever it is that you connect with awesome podcasts. Remember, the key to magnifying your miracles is remembering that your miracle is already here.